Hello everyone, my name is Ben, and if you don't know who I am, I make educational lifting videos. And today I want to answer this question, which is a really good question about progressive overload, which asks, basically, when it comes to progressive overload, should the goal be to increase either reps or weight every single session, or is it okay for things to take a few sessions before anything improves? And this question is so good because it cuts really deeply to the core of what most people misunderstand, I think, about progressive overload. And by the way, this question comes from a member of my free community. And so if you want to ask me anything and maybe even get your question answered in a video like this, join my free community. It is literally free. We have like 1,400 people in there. It's amazing to see everyone interacting and all that good stuff, learning from one another. Okay, so the short answer to this question is it is absolutely okay to not see increases in weight or reps over a couple of weeks, okay? And I'm gonna give an analogy to describe why that is the case. If you are dieting and you are losing weight, and let's say the amount of calories that you burn in a day is 2,000 calories, okay? Let's just assume that's the case. If you eat 1,900 calories in a day, so you're in a 100-calorie deficit, you are going to lose weight, right? It might be an imperceivable amount on a daily basis, but every single day you are losing a little itty-bitty bit of weight. Maybe, depending on who we're talking about, you'll see that progress over a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. But the point is just that as long as you are burning above 1,900 calories, you will continue to lose more and more weight up until the point where you get to that 1,900. And then once you get to a point where all you're burning is 1,900 calories in a day, and all you're eating is 1,900 calories in a day, well, now you're stalled, you're gonna stay at the same weight until you lower the calories. And so much in the same way that you can keep that deficit the same for a while, right, while still making progress and losing weight, the same can be true of lifting weights in the gym. Now, obviously those two things, losing weight and getting stronger or bigger, are different, but it's actually, I think, a pretty spot on analogy. Because if you think about like how we make progress in the gym, do you expect to like look more muscular in 7 days, right? Do you expect to wake up on Monday to, this week, do bench press and then wake up Monday next week and look like totally different? No, so like why would you assume that you absolutely need to see that load or those reps go up in order for you to make progress? Like adaptation functions very similarly and very slowly across many of these different domains. And when we're looking at weight and reps, yes, the progress of those things happens faster than seeing muscle growth, obviously, and losing weight, obviously. But when we think about this on a more principled level of, do I need to see increases every single week? No, what you need to do is you need to apply high effort every single week. And so as long as you're applying high effort every single week and you're standardizing your technique and you are concentrated heavily on the skill of the movements that you're doing, I tend not to be someone who worries almost at all about progressive overload, because my perspective on progressive overload is that it is something that kind of happens to us rather than something that we ourselves orchestrate. So that sounds kind of weird, so let me give an example. If I'm benching 200 pounds, we'll just stick with the bench press example, for the first time, let's say I do 5 reps, okay? Do I need to add more weight to that bar to get stronger at 5 reps? No, the answer is clearly no. Why? Well, because if I just put 200 pounds to the bar every single week, I'm consistent, I'm training at or close to failure every single week with the same technique over and over and over again, I will eventually get to the point where maybe instead of doing 200 for 5, I'm doing 200 for 8, for 10, for 12, for 15. And then, after months and months and months of adding reps to that same exact technique, that same exercise, I could then go back to 5 reps and find myself at 210 pounds, 215 pounds, 220 pounds for 5 reps, and so on and so on and so on. So I never needed to use more weight to eventually add more weight. What happened was I just applied consistent and hard effort. Of course, the reps went up over time. And when I arrived back at that point initially, I realized that I never needed to actually add more load to the bar intentionally. But when I went back to 5 reps, 200 was way too easy for 5. And so I needed to reactively add more weight to account for the fact that I wanted to do 5 reps and I wanted to apply high effort, right? So that's a little bit of a confusing sort of backwards way to look at it. But really, when you look at progressive overload this way, it's actually really, it's really comforting. It's like mind expanding. And the reason it is that way is because so many people like stress the hell out about, did I add more weight? Did I do more reps this week? Rather than simply just focusing on, am I applying high effort and am I using good quality, consistent, standardized technique? If you're doing those two things week to week, you don't really need to worry about progressive overload, because what will happen is if you're just applying the same effort to all of your motions every single week, naturally what will happen is the reps that you do will go up. Invariably, if the technique is good and controlled and you're standardizing it and you're keeping effort high every single week, which is to say at or close to failure, you will inevitably add more reps to that exercise, and eventually you will get to a point of having added so many reps that you'll just need to add more weight kind of reflexively, and then naturally the reps will lower. So this is a strategy that I use and I have used forever, for many years now, I think for 4 years now, and it just is the most like easy to apply method in my opinion, which is basically you start in like the lower-ish end of the rep range of like 6 to 10 reps, anything in there, and you do that to failure or close to failure, and you just use that same exact weight, and you just really prioritize the technique and the effort every single week. You don't even worry about the weight, you just prioritize the effort and the technique. And eventually you do more reps and more reps and more reps. It doesn't have to be every single week. It could be every other week that you're adding reps. Although what you'll probably find is the more in tune that you get with this strategy, the more easily you'll find that just applying effort will add more reps naturally. Eventually that 8 rep set becomes a 12, a 13, a 14, a 15 rep set. And by the time you maybe get to the higher end of the rep range, maybe close to 15 or somewhere there, you add more weight and naturally get kicked back to like 6 to 10 reps somewhere. And then the process just repeats, right? You use 6 to 10 reps, you just concentrate on technique and effort, standardize, standardize, standardize. The reps naturally climb because you're not like freaking out. You don't have all this anxiety about progressive overload. The reps just climb over time. Oh, look, now I'm doing 14 reps of an exercise with the same weight that I was using before for 6. Let me just add more weight. Boop, I'm gonna bump back to 6 reps. Now all of a sudden I'm using 15 pounds more or whatever it happens to be. For that same 6 reps, I'm gonna just stick with that for a very long time. I'm going to master that weight, master the technique with that weight, keep it consistent, keep it standardized, not thinking about anything other than effort and technique standardization. And this progressive overload thing is something that just happens to you. So again, much like the nutrition concept and much like any other, like learning any other skill, you're not necessarily, or rather, you don't necessarily need to see acute improvements every single time you do that thing, right? If you, for example, are learning an instrument, you're just gonna be shit at that instrument every single time you pick it up. But over time, you almost like don't even notice the progress session to session, but you look back from, you know, a month beforehand, 2 months beforehand, 6 months ago, and you're like a totally different person playing that instrument. And I think the same applies to lifting weights. As long as you're focused on the standardization of a technique and the quality of a technique and the effort, I think progressive overload is something that just happens to us. We don't need to consciously orchestrate it. So I hope that helps. I know it's a bit of a wonky, weird perspective. I hope it makes sense. And again, if you want your questions potentially answered like this, check out my free community, join below, and I'll see you all in the next one.